Culture warriors are, by their nature, destructive. They believe that our society is broken, that it is irredeemably racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic, and all the other phobias that they invent, and that it must be demolished and reconstructed from scratch. Culture warriors believe that the ongoing project of social liberalism has failed, and that we need to implement new authoritarian measures to fix society of its ailments. And this includes restrictions on freedom of speech and sometimes even compelled speech. They believe that children ought to be taught new pseudo-religious creeds, such as that we all have an innate gender identity, a gendered soul, if you like, and that all white children are complicit in white supremacy. They oppose the colour blindness espoused by the great Dr. Martin Luther King. They believe in re-engineering society so that we have equality of outcome rather than equality of opportunity. They generally show a lack of compassion or empathy or the capacity to forgive, and have developed a system of retribution known as cancel culture. As I have argued many times, the closest synonym for what we now call woke is anti-liberal. I've also pointed out that much of this has been well-intentioned, but that doesn't make it right. And from a personal perspective, the one thing that I really can't forgive is the impact that these activists fighting their culture war have had on the arts. With the rise of identity politics and the institutional capture that has come with it, many of us have seen how the creative industries have been enervated. The theatre has been particularly impacted, with most new plays only being commissioned if they satisfy the diversity requirements of the new state religion, and if they are seen to be promoting the correct message. Conformism is now demanded from the most independent of minds. Those of you who enjoy going to the cinema or watching streaming services such as Netflix will have noticed that many of the shows and films that are now produced are sermons dressed up as entertainment. Divisive social justice boilerplate is smuggled in wherever possible, and the audience can't quite shake the feeling that it's being hectored. Major prizes in the realms of theatre, film and literature are given to activists or to creatives who use their platforms to spread the sacred creed of intersectionality. Critics are complicit too, lauding work that has the approved values and damning those that don't. It all starts to feel like state-sanctioned art, propaganda for the establishment, and that's why so much of it feels bloodless and dispensable. And worse still, writers, artists, musicians, comedians, poets, anyone in the creative arts understands that they must toe the line in order to be commissioned and to receive the plaudits they so desire. This doesn't mean that there aren't exceptionally talented artists producing good work, but it does mean that their work is somewhat sanitised. And it definitely means that the most innovative of minds are stifled and unable to find work. That is not to suggest that art cannot be political or pedagogic. One of my favourite books growing up was Tom Brown's School Days, which is explicitly preachy, but a fine book nonetheless. And doubtless you'll remember The Death of Joe in Bleak House, where Charles Dickens halts the narrative to lecture the wealthy reader on the plight of the poor. Dead, your majesty, dead, my lords and gentlemen, and dying thus around us every day. The novel momentarily turns into a moral sermon, but it's still one of Dickens' most accomplished achievements. And yet, it's also the part of the novel that is the least effective. Perhaps it's a matter of taste, but I've always found that didactic art is the least interesting. I'm with Oscar Wilde, who explained in the preface to The Picture of Dorian Gray that vice and virtue are simply materials for artists. There is no such thing as a moral or an immoral book, he said. Books are well written or badly written, that is all. I don't read novels for lectures in morality. If I wanted that, I'd go to a church. In one of the rare moments when he got it wrong, George Orwell claimed that all art is propaganda. In truth, propagandistic art is often the most banal. The essence of creativity is individuality. Art is, as Zola put it, life seen through a temperament. When artists are expected to parrot the accepted views of the establishment, they cannot be said to be producing art at all. Rather, they are slaves to another person's vision. Some of the greatest artists throughout history have had to work under oppressive regimes or in fealty to the religious or political beliefs of those in power. But great artists find a way to be subversive within those constraints. How else was Michelangelo able to produce erotic imagery in the Sistine Chapel, right in the heart of the Vatican? He had his detractors, of course. The papal master of ceremonies said that his nudes were more fitting for a bathhouse or a tavern, and in response, Michelangelo painted the figure of Minos, judge of the dead in the underworld, with this man's face, and added some donkey ears and a snake biting his genitals. But his nude paintings weren't removed. He had found a way to work within the system. William Shakespeare gives us another example of a genius who found a way to work within oppressive constraints. Shakespeare composed over 100 love sonnets from one man to another, which were circulated in private until there was an openly gay king on the throne. But he found a way to represent a homoerotic relationship in his play Twelfth Night between Antonio and Sebastian. The way he did it is he just had to make sure that one of them was married off at the end of the play to get around the restrictions of the time period in which he lived. But today, something is different. What happens when all the artists are in lockstep? What if all the artists suddenly decided that their visions ought to be subordinated to the promotion of the ideology of the ruling class? The woke movement has created the conditions within which art is unlikely to flourish. The demands for self-censorship are too extreme. That's why we so often hear stories of books being removed from library shelves, sometimes even destroyed if they contain outdated stereotypes. It's why sensitivity readers at Puffin rewrote Roald Dahl's novels. It's why comedians have had their shows cancelled by promoters and venues. It's because these new Puritans see art as just another means by which the privileged can perpetuate their privilege. For them, Raphael's Transfiguration is little more than pigments on wood, daubed by a powerful white man in the interests of other powerful white men. We find ourselves in the bizarre situation where those who are incapable of understanding great art have nonetheless become the gatekeepers of the artistic industries. My hope is that while this cultural revolution is in full swing, a few great artists may still find a way to navigate around the constraints demanded by those in power. It won't be easy because so many artists are, as I say, now in lockstep, and those who are not are often mercilessly attacked. It seems unlikely that the woke movement will ever produce anything of lasting artistic value. So for the sake of our artistic legacy, let's hope that this culture war is short-lived.